The gentle hum of nature filled the air as the sun began to set over the horizon, casting golden hues across the fields that surrounded Jero's humble cottage. His home, a small wooden structure tucked deep in the countryside, was a place of refuge for those seeking wisdom and guidance. Tonight, Jero sat outside, his well-worn hands resting on the arms of an old rocking chair, watching as the colors of the evening sky changed slowly, from gold to pink to violet. He had lived many years, seen many faces, and helped many souls, but the struggles that brought people to his doorstep were always familiar. As the world grew more complicated, so did the problems people faced, especially the younger generation, who seemed burdened by expectations, doubts, and relentless pressures. Tonight, he was expecting a visit from someone whose story he knew all too well. Sarah, a 25-year-old woman with big dreams and an even bigger heart, had reached out to Jero not long ago. She had been overwhelmed by the demands of life, career challenges, personal setbacks, and the constant pressure to prove herself in a world that often felt indifferent. Though she had always been strong, these days, Sarah felt as if her inner resilience was wearing thin. The weight of responsibility had begun to erode the confidence she once had. Sarah arrived quietly, her car pulling up to the small gravel road that led to Jero's home. As she stepped out, the air was cool, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the trees. She paused for a moment, her heart heavy, before walking toward the porch where Jero waited. He smiled warmly as she approached.
"Welcome, Sarah,"
he said, his voice soft yet strong, as if it held the weight of 1,000 lessons.
"I can see the burden you're carrying. Sit with me for a while."
Sarah sat down, taking a deep breath.
I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this.
She admitted, her voice trembling slightly.
Everything feels too much, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to handle it all.
Jero nodded, his eyes filled with understanding.
"It sounds like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. But let me tell you something, Sarah. Strength doesn't come from avoiding pressure. It comes from learning how to endure it. Tonight, I'll share a story with you. One that may help you discover the emotional resilience you already have inside of you."
Jero leaned back in his chair, the faint sound of crickets beginning to fill the evening air. Sarah, though tired, found comfort in the peacefulness of the setting. She had come seeking answers, and now she was ready to listen.
"Many years ago,"
Jero began,
"there was a young woman named Lena. Much like you, she was determined, hard-working, and full of dreams. She wanted to build a successful life, one that would make her family proud and give her a sense of purpose. But, as it often happens, life began to challenge her at every turn."
Sarah nodded slightly, already feeling a connection to the story. She, too, had faced those challenges.
"Lena had a good job,"
Jero continued,
"but her workplace was filled with high expectations and constant pressure. Every day, she felt like she was running a race that had no finish line. No matter how hard she worked, there was always more to be done. She began to doubt herself, questioning whether she was truly capable of succeeding or whether she was destined to fail."
Jero glanced at Sarah.
"Sound familiar?"
Sarah sighed.
Yes, it does. It feels like no matter how much I push myself, it's never enough.
Jero smiled softly.
"That's because you're measuring your strength by the wrong standards,"
he said.
"Let me tell you what Lena learned."
He continued the story.
One day, Lena was given a project that seemed impossible to complete. The deadline was unreasonable, and the stakes were high. She worked tirelessly, barely sleeping, pushing herself to the limit. And still, it felt like she wasn't making progress. The stress began to overwhelm her, and for the first time, she thought about quitting.
Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had been there, on the brink of giving up.
Just when Lena was at her lowest,
Jero said,
she met someone, an old man in her city who was known for his wisdom. Much like the people who come to me, he could see that Lena was struggling, so he offered her some advice. He said, "Lena, you cannot always control the challenges that come your way, but you can control how you respond to them. Emotional resilience is not about being unaffected by pressure. It's about bending without breaking."
Jero paused, letting the words sink in. Sarah sat quietly, thinking about the idea of bending without breaking.
The old man explained further.
Jero continued.
Imagine you are a tree in a storm, he told her. The wind will blow, sometimes gently, sometimes fiercely. A rigid tree, one that refuses to bend, will snap under the force of the wind. But a tree that bends, that moves with the wind, survives the storm. Emotional resilience is about being that flexible tree. It's about adapting to the challenges, finding your center, and knowing that the storm will pass, and you will still stand tall.
Jero glanced at Sarah again, his eyes kind but serious.
Lena took this advice to heart. She began to approach her challenges differently. Instead of seeing them as signs of her weakness, she saw them as opportunities to grow. She stopped expecting perfection from herself and allowed herself to make mistakes, to learn from them, and to move forward. Slowly, she built emotional resilience. She learned how to stay strong under pressure, not by avoiding it, but by embracing it and adapting to it.
Sarah took a deep breath.
But it's so hard.
She said, her voice breaking slightly.
When the pressure is constant, when you feel like you're always on the edge, how do you keep bending without breaking?
Jero nodded, understanding her pain.
It is hard, Sarah, but that's why it's so important to build a strong foundation, just like that tree. Emotional resilience doesn't happen overnight. It comes from small, daily practices, from being kind to yourself when things don't go as planned, from reminding yourself that you are not defined by a single moment or failure, but by your ability to keep going.
He leaned forward slightly, his eyes holding Sarah's gaze.
The pressure you feel will always be there, in some form or another. Life will continue to test you, but every time you face that pressure and choose to bend instead of break, you are strengthening your emotional core. You are proving to yourself that you are capable of withstanding even the toughest storms.
Sarah thought about his words. She had always seen pressure as something negative, something to be avoided or defeated. But maybe Jero was right. Maybe it was about learning how to endure it, to grow from it, rather than letting it overwhelm her.
But what if I do break?
She asked softly.
What if one day the pressure is just too much?
Jero's expression softened.
We all have moments when we feel like we're going to break.
He said gently.
And sometimes we do. But breaking doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. What matters is how you rebuild yourself afterward. Every time you get back up after falling, every time you choose to keep going, you are becoming stronger. Resilience is not about never falling. It's about always finding the strength to rise again.
He smiled warmly.
And you, Sarah, have more strength in you than you realize.
As the evening grew darker, and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The weight of her struggles was still there, but it no longer felt insurmountable. Jero's words had given her a new perspective, one that she hadn't considered before. She realized now that she didn't need to fight the pressure or fear it. She needed to embrace it, to allow herself to bend without breaking, and to trust that she would grow stronger with each challenge she faced.
Thank you, Jero.
Sarah said quietly.
I think I understand now. It's not about being perfect or never feeling overwhelmed. It's about learning to be flexible, to adapt, and to keep going.
Jero smiled, his heart warmed by her realization.
Exactly.
He said.
And remember, resilience is a journey, not a destination. Every day you choose to keep going. Every time you face a challenge and come out the other side, you are building that emotional strength. So don't be afraid of the pressure, Sarah. It's there to help you grow.
Sarah stood up, feeling lighter than she had in weeks.
I'll try.
She said with determination.
I'll keep going, even when it's tough.
Jero nodded, watching her with pride as she prepared to leave.
That's all anyone can ask.
He said.
Just keep moving forward, one step at a time.
Before you go, if you found the story helpful or inspiring, I invite you to subscribe to my channel for more stories like Sarah's. Here, we explore the challenges of life and how we can grow stronger, more resilient, and more at peace with ourselves. Join our community and let's continue this journey together, because building emotional resilience and staying strong under pressure is something we can all achieve with the right guidance and mindset. So, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next story.